So I'm here at the MIT Martin Trust Center with Doug Williams, who is the software lead on the Orbit system. And we're excited because we're gearing up for the MIT MTC workshop that's going to be happening at the Visionaries Ventures Convention. Doug, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you're going to be bringing to the convention?
Sure. So thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us. As you mentioned, we are at the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. This is our central hub for entrepreneurship. MIT and Harvard have lots of resources. At MIT, we like to be the hub for the kind of core education, core frameworks. We're staffed by entrepreneurs in residence and direct the entrepreneurs that we're working with. Primarily MIT, as you would guess, but we have a lot of mixed teams. We find diverse teams really are ultimately the most powerful, and so we try to engender that at MIT and then in the greater Boston area. So very glad to be participating in your conference. One of the things we've done to get the community together here at MIT, and we're beginning to pilot it outside MIT, is we created Orbit as a one-stop shop for entrepreneurship. We pull all the events across all the calendars into one place. We have core resources. You and I talked, we could add some of your legal resources as to make entrepreneurs aware of it. We pull the core classes, and then we're beginning to build tools. We had done a very good job of capturing the information for MIT entrepreneurship, but as we look forward, the feedback we had was we wanted to try to begin to provide guidance. And we came to that conclusion just as the Gen AI tools were being made available. So we've begun to introduce Gen AI elements into our core Orbit platform. So we've got about 6,000 people at MIT on the platform now. We're beginning to pilot it outside, another 3,000 or more outside MIT. And the group that will come to this conference will be part of that group outside. So in the workshop, we'll be talking about our Gen AI tools.
And so Gen AI, generative AI, is kind of the buzzword of the day. But I've seen this tool in action, and it's pretty cool, and it seems like it's producing some really useful stuff. What was it that made you and your team decide to take this route versus all of the other Gen AI tools that you could have built?
So as we're thinking about where do we provide guidance, and we're working on our next generation of tools, and we treat our initiatives at the Trust Center like startups. So Orbit's treated like a startup. I'm thinking on the product side, I do some of the Gen AI, we've got developers. But as we did it, we realized starting with our core frameworks, which is discipline entrepreneurship, which Bill Aulette, who heads up our center, pulled together basically all the best practices. So Lean Startup, Lean Canvas, all the best writings into a single step-by-step guide. So 24 steps of entrepreneurship with a really strong emphasis on the customer. So we've got that framework, and for our classes and programs, we had matrices for every step and videos for every step. So helping automate that was really made sense as a starting point. And then Paul Cheek, our executive director, just came out with Startup Tactics, which is I've refined the idea, I really know who my target market is, I know how I'm going to solve it, or I've got ideas, what my economics are. What are the first things I do? How do I set goals? How do I think about legal aspects, hiring aspects? So he did Startup Tactics for that. And so automating those two frameworks was the place to start. We taught it a lot. We had these matrix. So that's what we've automated. Bill was talking to a very successful MIT entrepreneur who was using our tools, and he said, this is like a jetpack. So I came back from a trip, and they're now the HLEP AI jetpacks. And Bill has a sense of humor, so the same artist who did the drawings for his book did some drawings for the jetpack. So we've got Tim the Beaver of MIT flying around with a jetpack. Because you need to keep your sense of humor if you're doing a startup. We basically, Bill's framework says you need to have combine the heart of a Navy SEAL with the je ne sais quoi of a pirate. So you need to have everything planned out, but you also need to have a sort of pirate mentality, keeping that spirit is important. The last thing you want to do as a startup founder is read some more dry researchy textbook. And so those are our frameworks. And what we've done with the AI jetpacks and what we'll do in the workshop is it's a great place to get started, and it basically introduces you to disciplined entrepreneurship and startup tactics, but it automates it for your idea. So if you have your idea, in the workshop we'll be asking people to bring their laptops. They'll register for Orbit on a pilot. We're going to ask people to sign up for the wait list ahead of time so we can get them the instructions on it before the conference. And that day, instead of having a big presentation, MIT is very oriented towards the practical. So it's very hands-on. So we'll be walking through with everybody how to begin to use the tools, which really start with a focus on the customer. Who's your customer? Who are you going to aim for? We think that's really the core of successful. As an engineer, I know that you can find solutions to problems, but you need to find who you're doing it with. The world does not need more good products. You need to be great. And if you're going to be great, you need to know who you're going to be great for. And that's what this orients it. So when we do the workshop, we'll be asking people to input their ideas, and then I'll work them through the first steps of the disciplined entrepreneurship and startup tactics, and introduce them to the tools.
And that actually hits on another key point for the Visionaries Ventures Convention, and that is that connecting with people is so important to actually understand what other people are thinking, what other perspectives are out there. Because I think in our own silos, we just assume. We're like, oh, I know roughly, I'm not going to do it that way. That's how the business person would think about it. Or that's how the medical person or the MIT engineer or the MIT business person is going to think about it this way. And that's just not always the case.
Yes.
Before we wrap up the conversation, though, I do want to touch on your background with startups. You have hands-on experience. If you just let the audience know a little bit about, I'm sure you don't have time to tell every story.
Sure.
But just to get a feel for who they would be learning from if they show up for your workshop.
Sure. So good points on the community side. The startups I've done, it's the wonderful thing about a startup is a community working through to solve problems. And when you talk about the different points of view, and this is true at a startup, but it really should be true when you're in your law firm. Who's the customer? Because the customer is ultimately who you're trying to solve problems for. And if you're doing any startups, you want to really have a passion for solving problems for that customer. And so I've been very lucky in my career to ride waves. So the internet wave, the mobile wave, now Gen AI, and then use the technology to solve problems for customers. And so in the internet wave, we built a company, Family Education, that became the leading K-12 portal that we sold to Pearson. So they had 100 times the resources. We had 100 times the audience by being more focused on what were the problems of the parents of K-12 students, of the teachers of the audience, where they were creating products for themselves, and that's still running. I got introduced to the CEO of Zipcar. Was able to come in when Robin Chase and Roy, her husband, went to do their next startup. I got to take over from Roy and help build Zipcar from 60 people to 1,000 people, multiple cities. Had a great ride with that, and then we sold that to Avis, and then had gotten to know the folks at Runkeeper, another local startup. We grew that to 45, 50 million runners worldwide. Again, had to focus on who was the right audience. It turned out the right audience for us was really beginning to intermediate runners. So we were okay across multiple sports, but we had to be great for beginning to intermediate runners. And we were. ASICS bought us. ASICS brought its all of its North American resources to Boston. They're still here. So ASICS digital headquarters is in Boston because of Runkeeper. Avis is still running Zipcar here in Boston, so very proud of that. And then most recently, working on new healthcare standards to make the data more accessible over modern techniques. So building tools for startups, like I'm getting to, it's kind of a kid in a candy shop. And we've been really happy with the combination of a pretty intuitive UI with the detailed matrices, and then working with MIT startup Stack AI gives us a middle tier that made it fairly straightforward for us to get really good results, and then we can support any LLM we want. We're currently using more OpenAI, but we can experiment with Perplexity and other ones. So good UI, the matrices, the middle tier, and then the LLMs are really making, for all of us, they're in a battle. OpenAI has essentially pulled the world's public information in one place, so we can build off of that. But we've been very pleased. We term the jetpacks as an AI assistant, so like a smart group of undergrads working on your behalf. And what we really want to espouse is use these tools so you can focus on working with real customers, see what they are, and then make updates, not just using the chatbots to tell you what to do, to work with the customers, but iterate quickly.
Bringing it back over and over again to the human connection. That's amazing. So if you haven't already, make sure you go to the Visionaries and Ventures Convention website, get your ticket, sign up. You're going to want to sign up soon so you can get a spot in Doug's workshop.
Yeah, sounds great. So once you sign up, you'll sign up for the workshop. We'll send you a link to the wait list. We'll get you registered before it, and then Sunday afternoon, the 17th,
yeah.
November 17th, we'll get together for an hour or so and kind of get you started. And it's been great for me as people have come onto the tools. They're thrilled to have these resources. When I was at my startups, I wish I had these resources. So it's fun to apply the newest technology in ways that are useful, and glad to meet you all on November 17th on that Sunday.
Yeah, well, we're really appreciative. Thank you so much, Doug.
Sure. Thank you.